Ever scroll through Reddit and just stop at like a thread that just kind of hits you?
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at one about the cost of having kids in 2024,
Okay.
and it really got me thinking. So we decided to make it a whole deep dive today.
Yeah.
We're talking economics, social pressures, even the environment,
Right.
all the stuff that I think is really on people's minds when they're trying to decide, is now the time.
Yeah. Especially now.
Yeah.
I mean, what I found really interesting in this Reddit thread was just how honest people are being about it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's not just the numbers.
Yeah.
It's like their anxieties about what it means to be a parent now.
Right.
It's like it's a window into like a generation having to make some really tough choices, I think.
Oh, absolutely. All right, well, let's jump into it then. One thing that really stood out in the Reddit thread was that it's just way harder to make ends meet now compared to, like, I don't know, our grandparents' generation.
For sure.
In 1960, a single income could support 73% of families.
Wow.
By 2018, that number had plummeted to 32%.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a massive difference.
It's a huge difference.
Huge.
And even with most households having two incomes now,
right.
people are still struggling.
They are.
Just think about childcare costs alone.
Oh, my gosh.
They've gone up by 214% since 1990.
Yeah.
I mean, wages have only gone up by about 143% in that same time.
Yeah.
So even if both parents are working,
right,
a huge chunk of that money is going right back out the door to childcare.
Exactly. It's like you're running just to stay in place.
You're on a treadmill.
It's a financial treadmill.
Yeah. And how does that resonate with you? Have you seen that in your own life at all?
Absolutely. I mean, I think everybody feels that squeeze in some way.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's housing.
Oh, yeah.
Which is another massive part of this whole equation.
Right.
So back in 1960, the ratio of median home price to median income was 2.2.
Okay.
So that means, like, homes were pretty affordable compared to what people were making.
Right.
But by 2021, that ratio jumped to 4.1.
Huh.
It's like, no wonder young people are, like, buying a home. Ha, that's a pipe dream.
It feels impossible.
And then you think about, previous generations, like, how do they do it?
Mm-hmm.
And you look at something like millennials only hold about 5.9% of the wealth in the U.S.
Right.
While boomers at the same age held 21%.
Wow.
That's a huge gap in wealth accumulation.
That's massive.
And it just makes starting a family so much more challenging.
It really does. And I think that directly impacts, when people feel like they can get married.
Right.
When they can buy a house, when they can have kids.
Yeah.
It's like this domino effect that pushes back all these milestones.
It's true. And then let's not forget about student loan debt.
Oh, yeah. The elephant in the room.
Yeah. In 1970, the average student loan debt was just over $1,000, which is about $7,500 in today's money.
Right.
Now it's over $28,950.
It's like a whole other car payment.
It's a lot.
Every month.
And it's for years and years.
It's crazy how that debt impacts everything buying a house. Starting a business, even just feeling like you're financially stable enough to think about kids.
Yeah.
It's like you're starting your adult life with like an anger tied to your leg.
Oh, it's a lot. It feels like one hurdle after another, and we're going to keep going down this rabbit hole.
We're going deep.
Because next up, we're going to be talking about healthcare costs.
Okay.
And trust me, that's a whole other can of worms.
All right, let's do it. One thing that really came through in that Reddit thread is how healthcare costs are now like a major factor in whether or not people even think about having kids.
Yeah, I mean, having a baby should be like this joyful, exciting moment, not a financial black hole.
Exactly.
And like one user shared that even with insurance, they still had to pay like almost $3,000 out of pocket.
Oh, wow.
Just for having the baby. Like back in 1980, that was less than $500 adjusted for inflation.
Oh, my God.
It's like you almost want to consider just having the baby at home.
Right.
And I'm someone who, like, loves modern medicine.
Yeah, it makes you think, though, like, how do we as a society kind of balance out, people wanting families?
Yeah.
But then there's just incredibly high cost of, like, bringing a child into the world.
Right. And especially when you think about the fact that healthcare costs now gobble up, like, 18% of our GDP.
Right.
Versus 5% back in 1960.
It's wild. And on top of all of that,
yeah,
you've got climate change now.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Which adds like a whole other layer of complexity to this whole thing.
Definitely. And that was something that people were talking a lot about in the Reddit thread.
It's a big concern.
Yeah. I mean, we're looking at rising sea levels, extreme weather, resource scarcity. Like, it makes sense to be worried.
For sure.
About what kind of world, your kids are going to inherit.
Yeah, and it brings up these big ethical questions too, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are our responsibilities as parents,
Right.
not just to our kids, but to the planet as a whole?
Totally.
It's a conversation that's only just starting, I think.
Yeah.
But it's going to shape, how we think about family in the future.
Oh, absolutely. But it's so easy to get caught up in like all the stats and the big picture stuff, But I think it's important to remember that we're talking about real people.
Yes.
Like there was this one user who was like, we're making $100,000 a year combined income.
Right.
And we have 4 kids and we still can't afford childcare.
Wow.
Yeah. It's like, whoa.
It's one thing to talk about it in theory, but to hear people's actual struggles, it really hits home.
It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes it real. And another person said that they had $2,000 in physician and hospital bills, even with insurance.
Wow.
Just for the birth.
That's on top of everything else.
And that's not even counting all the other stuff.
Yeah.
Like diapers and formula and clothes.
The never-ending list.
It's never ending. And, I've noticed a lot of people are choosing to be stay-at-home parents.
Right.
And not because they necessarily want to,
Yeah.
but because childcare costs are just so high.
They can't afford it.
They can't afford it. And that has like financial and social implications too.
Absolutely.
It's a lot to weigh. I mean, this Reddit thread definitely paints kind of a bleak picture.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to point out that it's not all doom and gloom.
Right.
There were also comments from people who are like, it's hard and it's messy and it's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also like the most amazing, rewarding thing I can imagine.
Of course.
Yeah. There was this one user who said, it's the most love-filled experience I could ever imagine.
Yeah, it's that emotional richness.
Yeah.
That you can't really measure.
Right, you can't put a price tag on that.
Exactly. And this thread really shows like that tension.
Right.
Between like the practical concerns and those really deep personal hopes.
Yeah, it feels like we're watching this societal tug of war.
It is.
With economic realities on one side.
Yeah.
And this really human desire to have a family on the other.
And navigating that tension is tough.
Yeah.
It takes, a real nuanced approach. We have to acknowledge like the real pressures people are under. But also recognize that there's no like one right answer when it comes to family.
It's all about what feels right for the individual.
Exactly.
And speaking of different paths, one thing that surprised me in the thread was that people were actually talking about automation.
Oh, interesting.
And how it's going to impact the future of work.
Yeah.
Like some people are arguing that, with more jobs being automated, we might actually need a smaller workforce.
Huh. That's a good point.
Yeah, it makes you think about like the implications of all this technology.
Right. Like how will it change our ideas about work?
Yeah.
About family.
And family structures. Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing.
It is. Are we heading towards a future where like those traditional ideas have to be completely reimagined?
Right.
It's a good question.
God, that's a whole other deep dive.
I know, right?
Like
these are like those big questions that don't have easy answers.
Well, we have to ask them.
We do.
Because the choices we make now about having kids are going to have ripple effects for like generations.
Yeah, for sure.
One user said, it's not just about whether we can afford to have kids.
Right.
It's about whether we can afford not to.
Whoa.
Good point.
That is powerful.
And it makes you think about like the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of developed countries are facing this.
Declining birth rates.
Yeah, declining birth rates.
Yeah.
And if that keeps happening...
Who's going to take care of us?
Yeah, who's going to take care of us when we're older?
Right.
Who's going to drive the economy? Who's going to shape the future?
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal. So this seemingly personal choice becomes like this global issue with massive consequences.
All connected.
Wow. Okay, my brain is officially fried.
I know, right?
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
And I think it's safe to say that having kids in 2024 is a lot more complicated.
Oh, for sure.
Than it was for, past generations.
Definitely. And the economic stuff is real.
Yeah.
Housing, healthcare, childcare, education.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure on families.
And then you've got the social changes too.
Right. Like more women are working.
Yeah.
And we need more equitable parenting.
Yeah.
And then the environment is just like this huge question mark. Well, can we ethically bring children into this world with all the challenges that are facing us?
Yeah. It's a lot to think about, but at least, we're talking about it.
Exactly.
We're like acknowledging the hard parts and the good parts.
Right.
And like respecting people's choices.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as we move forward, it's all about having these open conversations.
Right.
And trying to find ways to
deal with these pressures, the economic stuff, the social changes, all of it.
Yeah, instead of just debating, should people have kids or not?
Right.
Maybe we should focus on how to make it easier.
Exactly.
For people who do want to have kids.
How to create a world where it's a good choice.
Yeah, where it's joyful and it's sustainable.
And that takes everybody working together,
Yeah.
Policymakers, businesses, communities, all of us.
It's a team effort for sure. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question.
Okay.
Given everything we've talked about today, the costs, the social shifts, the environment, all of it.
Right.
What do you think are the most important things to consider?
Yeah.
When you're deciding whether or not to have kids?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is.
There might not be one right answer.
Right.
But it's something we should all be thinking about.
Absolutely. So if you're listening and you're like, whoa, this deep dive got me thinking, I encourage you to talk about it with your friends, your family, your partner, whoever.
Keep the conversation going.
Keep the conversation going.
Share your thoughts.
Yeah.
Because the more we talk about it,
right,
the better we can all navigate this whole thing.
This crazy world of family life.
Exactly.
All right. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those brains buzzing.
Always.